Welcome to Peculiar Tales, the show where we dive into the stranger things in history, urban legends, ghost stories, and anything else we find, well, peculiar. I'm Kristy.
And I'm done. So, how do you feel about murder mysteries?
I am a fan. I am a big fan of murder mysteries.
Now, are you a murder mystery fan of like novels or true crime?
Both, actually. Both, but I love me a good true crime. I can't help it. Any of the podcasts, any of the documentaries, I am here for it.
I am with you. I am with you all the way on that. I too love a good murder mystery. So, today's story: reputation, wealth, status, and jealousy. 50 miles south of Boston, Massachusetts is Fall River, a textile mill town. This town could be known for the mills. However, it's known for a terrifying, gruesome double murder. The man of the house, Andrew, dead, slumped on a couch in the sitting room, struck 10 or 11 times in the head. They say his face was almost in half from an axe-wielding, enraged person. And the lady of the house? Well, Abby was found dead upstairs in the guest bedroom. She had been struck 18 times. Her head was smashed to pieces, also presumably by the same rageful person who killed the man of the house. A murder mystery. Some say the murderer was caught and freed, and others say the killer was never found. Lizzie Borden, a name known around the world for the murders of her father and her stepmother. Did she do it? Was she innocent and wrongly accused? I'll give you the story, and you decide.
Andrew Borden was not a regular townsman. He was very wealthy and was in good standings with the community. He had investments in the mills, banks, and real estate. Andrew did not brag or show off his good fortune. Andrew instead lived on the unfashionable 2nd Street in a plain, unassuming house. Lizzie was 32 years old, still living at home, and desperately wanted to live on the hill, an area much more desirable than her 2nd Street location. Lizzie was aware that her father had enough money to move the family from the neighborhood they lived in, which happened to be mostly Catholics, and being a Protestant, these were things Lizzie did not like. After the discovery of the 2 dead bodies, the public only knew that the murderer had struck the victims in the daylight hours at the Borden's home on a busy street 1 block away from town's business area.
There seemed to be no motive like robbery or sexual assault. The neighbors and the people passing by heard nothing, and no one saw a suspect enter or leave the Borden property, which is odd because you would think that when someone's being attacked by an axe that there might be screams of terror or yelling for help. At first, the police thought that the killings were because of a man, most likely a foreigner. A few hours after the murders, the police arrested a suspect. As it turned out, an innocent Portuguese immigrant from a group of new European workers that lived in the town. Lizzie was a Sunday school teacher at the family's very wealthy Central Congregational Church. So, this is why at first Lizzie was not a suspect. As well as the other people of Lizzie's social stature that they just couldn't imagine someone like Lizzie Borden would murder her parents. Moving on with the story, it is interesting to point out that as Fall River's immigrant population boomed, the police force was growing when Irishmen became police. The day that the murders took place, Irish police were alongside other policemen, 12 or so in total, and these policemen took control of the Borden house and the property.
As Lizzie was getting interrogated in her room and being interviewed by others, she was uncomfortable due to the fact that she thought the police to be beneath her, social status-wise, that is. Lizzie had been naive on the day of the murders. She had claimed that she came into the house from the barn and discovered her father's body. She also said that she yelled for the family's 26-year-old servant, Bridget Sullivan, also known as Maggie. It is said that Maggie was resting in her third-floor bedroom. Again, two people being hacked to death and not even the servant heard anything? Really? So from here it is said that Lizzie told Maggie she needed a doctor and instructed Maggie to go across the street to the family doctor's house. Not the renowned doctor who lived next door and treated Fall River, and she did not send her to the French-Canadian doctor that lived diagonally behind the family. No. Lizzie sent Maggie across the street, and when the good doctor was not there at his home, Maggie was sent down the street to get a friend.
Now, during Lizzie's interrogation, she talked with different policemen, and each story she told to each police officer started to change ever so slightly. And the police started to notice this, as well as the fact that the woman did not shed a single tear for her dead murdered parents, not while talking to any policeman. These things put Lizzie at the top of the suspect list. It was just about now that a police officer found information pointing to the fact that Lizzie had tried to purchase deadly prussic acid from a nearby drugstore the day before the murders. Now, for anyone who may not know, prussic acid is also known as hydrogen cyanide. It is a highly toxic and volatile liquid. It can cause rapid death, occurring in minutes of exposure. Now, between the shifting makeup of the police force and the election of the city's second Irish mayor, Mr. John W. Conglin, there was a challenge to the native-born control. Conglin's newspaper, the Fall River Globe, was a militant working-class daily newspaper that lashed out at the mill owners. Not long after the two murders, the newspaper focused on Lizzie's guilt. The newspaper put out rumors that Lizzie's family members that lived on the hill were pooling millions of dollars to ensure that Lizzie would not be convicted of the two murders. The Fall River Evening News, though, it was said that they defended Lizzie Borden's innocence.
5 days after the murder, there was an inquest. The inquest lasted 3 days. Lizzie Borden took the stand each day. It was during the inquest only that Lizzie testified under oath. While Lizzie was being questioned, it was brought up those months leading up to the murder that her father had killed her pigeons. It was believed that he killed the pigeons that were kept in the barn because the birds were attracting children that kept breaking in and hunting them. It was explained by Lizzie with no real concern or sadness that her father simply wrung their necks, going on to say that they were more of a utility bird than a pet. However, it was speculated that when her father did kill them, it caused her a lot of distress. The police were able to gather a lot of inconsistencies, but it was Lizzie Borden's testimony that led her into a world of self-incrimination. During the inquest, there was no defense attorney for her. However, there were people defending her character.
The good doctor that was very loyal and believed her to be innocent said this during his testimony, that after the murders he prescribed a double dose of morphine to help her sleep, that its side effects, he said, could account for her confusion. So, Lizzie's 41-year-old sister Emma Borden, who also lived at home, said that the sisters were not angry with the stepmother. Although family and neighbors who gave interviews with the newspapers, as well as the investigation information, suggested a different opinion on the matter. On the day of the murders, Emma, the sister, who was 15 miles away on vacation, and Lizzie and Maggie were the only ones home with Abby, the stepmother, after Andrew left for his AM business rounds. Maggie was outside washing windows when the stepmother Abby was being killed on the second-floor guest bedroom. And shortly after his return, Andrew was killed on the first-floor sitting room. And during this, Maggie the servant said she was done with the windows, and she was resting on the third floor in her room in the attic. And just as a reminder here, Lizzie was in the barn, remember, and the sister was on vacation 15 miles away. So the judge, the district attorney, and the police marshal all determined that Lizzie was, quote unquote, probably guilty. 1 week after the brutal murders, Lizzie Borden was arrested for the crimes. Lizzie was sent to the county jail. Now, if Lizzie was not loving that 2nd Street home, the 9.5 by 7.5 foot cell she was confined to must have been more than offensive. Lizzie spent 9 months in that cell.
Lizzie's arrest caused an uproar that in a short time turned into national news. It was then that the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the women's suffragette gathered by Lizzie's side. The supporters protested at the trial that Lizzie did not have a jury of her peers. This is because women had no rights to serve on juries. However, the supporters were very vocal about this detail. Remember Lizzie's upper-class status she had before the murders? Well, this status helped her because during the preliminary hearing, one of Boston's prominent defense lawyers joined the family attorney to advocate for the innocence of Lizzie. The courtroom that was above the police station was small and crammed with Lizzie supporters, especially women from the Hill. At times they were uplifted by the testimonies, like when the Harvard Union chemist reported that he found no blood on the 2 axes or the 2 hatchets that the police had taken from the cellar, as well as Lizzie gave the police her dress she was wearing at the time of the murder, and there was only minuscule spots of blood on the hem. Mind you, it was given to the police 2 days after the murder took place.
Lizzie's attorneys did not let up that the prosecution offered no murder weapon and no bloody clothes. And as far as that prussic acid, well, that was explained away with misidentification. That's interesting. A lot of people look alike. Also, the multitude of supporters that Lizzie had remained loyal to her and felt that her guilt was beyond belief. They felt that Lizzie was a well-bred, virtuous woman, a Protestant nun, they said. That was described by the national president of the Temperance Union. You see, the reference of Protestant nun brings up the subject that there were a growing number of women not married and having a family to take care of. But they were still being very religious and pure. Sure, for the most part of society wanted women to be homebound with family duties, but there was also a growing percentage of women that wanted independence in education, as well as the same rights as men. And there were some women that just could not chance marrying the wrong person. This was a challenge of the 19th century for some women. When it comes to the Borden sisters, Emma was considered a spinster. On the deathbed of Emma's mother, she asked Emma, quote unquote, "Take care of baby Lizzie."
By all accounts, Emma did in fact devote her life to Lizzie. Unlike Emma, Lizzie was part of many social activities. The Temperance Union, her Christian endeavor that supported Sunday schools. Lizzie was also a board member of the Fall River Hospital. At the end of the preliminary hearing, Lizzie's defense attorney delivered an impressive closing argument. Her supporters gave a loud applause. But all of this was fruitless because the judge determined that Lizzie was probably guilty and should remain in jail until the state Supreme Court trial. Keep in mind that the Attorney General or the District Attorney wanted to bring this to the Supreme Court, even though they both thought she was guilty. There was holes in the police's evidence. Also, while Lizzie's reputation in town was incapable of being attacked, her arrest had its supporters of her possible guilt. The district attorney decided in November to bring the case to the grand jury. Not sure he would get an indictment, he still chose this course of action. There were 23 jurors in total that gathered to hear the case of the double murder 3 months prior. The jury of 23 adjourned with no action. The grand jury heard the dramatic testimony on December 1st, 1892.
Alice Russell was a very religious and moral woman. It is noted that she was in fact single at the age of 40. Alice was a member of the same church as Lizzie, as well as a close friend to Lizzie. Alice, you see, was the friend that Maggie was sent to go get when the good doctor was not at home. So as the story goes, Alice had slept in the Borden's family home for several nights after the murders, with the father and the stepmother's bodies on mortician stretcher boards in the dining room. Now, let me be clear that, again, even though she lived down the street, she stayed in that house for several nights with the dead Andrew and Abby in the dining room on stretchers. Okay, so Alice did testify at the inquest, the preliminary hearing, and earlier before the grand jury. However, Alice decided to keep one very important detail of information a secret. Having a guilty conscience over the secret, Alice felt that after consulting a lawyer, she had to give this information to the district attorney. So, on December 1st, 1892, Alice Russell, in all good conscience, took the stand and told the grand jury her information. The new testimony from Alice was this. The Sunday morning after the murders, Lizzie pulled a dress from a shelf in the pantry closet and started to burn it in the cast iron coal stove.
The next day, the grand jury decided to indict Lizzie Borden. Even now, the Attorney General and the District Attorney were dragging their feet. The Attorney General left the case in April of 1893. The Attorney General had been sick, and his doctor decided that he could not keep up with the demands of the Borden case. So the Attorney General chose for the case the District Attorney from northern of Boston to be co-prosecutor with Jose M. Knowlton, the Bristol County District Attorney. Knowlton thought that Lizzie was guilty, but he knew it was a long shot to get the conviction. He was determined to follow through with his duties to prosecute the case. Knowlton prosecuted with what has been said was skill and passion. His closing argument lasted 5 hours. Knowlton thought it was going to be a hung jury. That might keep Lizzie's supporters happy. She would not be considered guilty, and contentment for the ones who thought her guilty. And this way, if new evidence came to light, she could be retried. The district attorney, however, did not count on Lizzie's demeanor in the court. It was unanticipated that her demeanor would influence the outcome. Sure, there were no women in the jury, but in a courtroom where men had all the power, she came across as meek and mild, basically helpless. Lizzie dressed in black. Her appearance was tightly corseted, dressed in flowy clothing, and wait for it, holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a fan in the other. There was a newspaper that said she was quite modest and appeared well bred. There was another description by a newspaper that said, "She lacks Amazonian properties. She could not pose the physical strength, let alone the moral degeneracy, to wield a weapon with skull-cracking force."
So with Andrew's money, Lizzie could afford the very best team of lawyers to defend her, which included a former Massachusetts governor. The former governor had appointed 3 of the judges who presided over the case. The announcement of a misleading charge by one to the jury was described by a newspaper as, quote-unquote, a plea for the innocent. The judge's actions impeded the prosecution's case. The jury itself showed the prosecution that there was a problem. The jury, you see, was made up of men that were farmers and men that were tradesmen. Most of the men were practicing Protestants, and some had daughters the same age as Lizzie. So we can assume jury selection was not the biggest priority back then. Good for Lizzie, bad for the prosecution. The jury of farmers and tradesmen decided to acquit Lizzie, but they waited an hour to give the impression that they didn't decide it too quick. The courtroom, that was mainly the press and women's groups, applauded the acquittal. However, Lizzie Borden's life was now changed forever.
2 months after the innocent verdict was given, the sisters moved to a large Victorian house on the hill. There was a great number of people in her church that now shunned Lizzie, and Lizzie was now Fall River's conversation piece of sorts. She was followed by homeless children and stared down when she was in public. Even when she was home, there was no peace. Fast forward to 4 years later, in 1897, after Lizzie was acquitted for murder. She was arrested and charged with shoplifting, and it is said she made restitution. Lizzie did, however, enjoy traveling to Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. Lizzie dined in style and would attend the theater. Lizzie's life seemed to be privileged in the sense that she could treat herself to the many things life had to offer due to being rich. The two sisters in 1904 had a falling out, and Emma moved out in 1905. It is said that the two sisters never talked to each other again. Both women died in 1927. Lizzie died, and 9 days later Emma died. Both women were laid to rest on the same plot as their murdered father and stepmother.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
this is a crazy case.
So, I mean, so far, I believe that the servant was in on it somehow. I mean, nobody ever talks about it, but can we just for a hot second here acknowledge that she was said to be the only one in or near the house. That's it. And she's not questioned. She's not thought of.
I don't know. I feel like they probably did investigate her, but
You can't find that anywhere.
I just do I think it's possible that they were in on it together? Yes. Do I believe Lizzie had nothing to do with it? No. I can't back that theory up.
No, I think they did it together, but it astonishes me that that servant wasn't charged the same way as she was. Now, it is said online, like you'll find it, that some speculated that the two of them had a relationship, and that would have been a big no-no.
Absolutely.
It would have been frowned on.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it was a miscarriage of justice somehow that servant was not questioned more.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised that her being the only other person in the house didn't point more fingers at her. But also, too, everything else Lizzie did throughout all of it. Just, I don't know. In my course, it's wrong. I don't know. I can't possibly wrap my head around that she had nothing to do with it. She's, I don't know. I just can't.
Today, the Lizzie Borden house is a museum, and it doubles as a bed and breakfast. It is also said to be haunted. There are experiences such as apparitions of a woman in a nightgown, footsteps, and even laughter. Some people have said that they had the feeling of being touched, as well as doors will open on their own and lights will go off. How interesting, though, is it that she wanted so much to move from that 2nd Street house? And if the hauntings are true, for all of her efforts, she's still at the 2nd Street location 133 years later.
Lizzie Borden took an axe. She gave her mother 40 whacks. When she'd seen what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Thank you for listening today, and be sure to join us on our social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. And until the peculiar calls again for another tale, bye for now.